Welcome to Trends with Benefits, an award-winning podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. We explore new ways of thinking about the markets, work, and life. Here's your host, Ed Lopez.
One of the fastest growing sports in the U.S. for the last few years has been pickleball. Well, it's definitely been a trend or fad question on this podcast at least a couple times, but there's a global cousin of this sport called Padel, or actually Padel, or we'll talk about how to pronounce that a little bit later with my guest. Padel is smashing into the sports scene for its simplicity, inclusiveness, and accessibility. Now, I haven't played either, but my guest today, Mr. Bill Ullman, has not only played Padel, but he's learned to coach the sport. He sits on the board. Is it sit on the board or sit on the committee of the USPA?
I'm a member of elected to the board. Yep.
Awesome. Of the USPA, it's the Association for Padel in the U.S., and interestingly, he's a member of the board of directors for Van Eck Corporation. And in late 2023, I believe, Van Eck became a sponsor of the USPA. And so it's probably long past due to have a discussion about this. But, the thought of having Bill on the podcast just reminded me of what I know about him already at just kind of surface level. I knew there was so much more I wanted to learn about. Very varied background. And so I think we can cover a lot of ground, particularly financial services. He has a background in investment banking, financial services M&A. He's an advisor to various fintech firms. He's been with a fintech firm before as well, entrepreneur, and he's also host of his own podcast called Squashing the Market. Bill, thank you very much, and welcome to the show.
It's great to be here with you, Ed. I've enjoyed our relationship over the years, and obviously with Van Eck and with Jan for going on almost 4 decades now. It's been great.
Yeah, let's start out with Padel, or is it paddle? How do you pronounce this sport?
Here's the thing. So a lot of people in America call it, particularly in the Northeast, call it Padel to differentiate it from another racket sport that we've invented in America called platform tennis or paddle tennis, which is played on a mini tennis court with a chicken wire screen fence around it. And it's played largely in the Northeast, Chicago area, kind of that part of America. Along comes this sport called paddle or Padel. And I think Americans, particularly in the Northeast, started saying Padel to differentiate it from paddle tennis, the shorthand paddle. But the truth of the matter is, it's a very Latin American sport. The origins of paddle are in Mexico, invented in 1969 in Acapulco. The sport is really pronounced paddle, P with an accent over the A, if you're looking at it in sort of Spanish language. So if you go to Miami and play this sport, it's always paddle or paddle. Up here in New York, it's sometimes paddle, it's sometimes Padel. It doesn't matter. Frankly, as long as you play the game, it's all good.
So for the purposes of this podcast, you may hear either if we're talking paddle or Padel, we're talking about this particular sport. Tell me a little bit about it. I've heard like a mix of tennis, racquetball.
Yeah, it really is a combination of a lot of different racket sports. So it has tennis-like scoring, doubles tennis characteristics in that it's played over a net. And there are 2 service boxes, just like in tennis. But it has elements of squash and racquetball in that the court is surrounded by glass walls and screens, sort of fencing in the middle near the net. And so the ball can ricochet off the walls. You can hit it into the wall and over the net. So it has these elements of tennis and of squash and the geometry and strategy of those sports as well. And it's played with a non-stringed racket, a paddle, that's about 1.5 inches thick with a grip on the bottom. And the sport has really taken off, particularly during, I think, COVID, like pickleball got and tennis got big jumps from COVID because people could do it at a distance and it was outdoors. Same thing with paddle. You're at enough of a distance that there was no chance of infection or anything like that. And so I think all these racket sports had a great run during the COVID period and grew rapidly.
How did you come across it? How did you get involved? I mean, being a squash guy and
so
were you skeptical at all?
No, it's funny. What happened is I got invited on a college kind of boys golf and tennis trip in 2018 to a club in the Bahamas where they had golf and tennis, and we were all ex-college squash and tennis players who like to play golf now. And we went down for this long weekend, and my friend said, "Oh, we have some paddle courts here. Do you guys want to play?" And of course, it was the first time we'd ever even seen the courts. We all got on the courts, and we spent the rest of the weekend, beating the crap out of each other in this game. Well, each one of us more competitive than the next. And I kind of said, "Oh my God, I love this game." So then I YouTubed it, I Googled it, started watching videos. And by the way, you can go down the rabbit hole on lots of things. I went deep down the rabbit hole on paddle videos. And when the pros play this game, it's even more exciting than, when us normal mortals play, because in this game, if you hit the ball, bounce it down on the court, it bounces over the wall, people can run out of the court and hit it back in. But so anyway, I got addicted to watching these videos, and then COVID hit and I couldn't really play or do anything. And then a club opened in Philadelphia called Padelphia, and I drove down there during COVID to play a couple times. So I was starting to get my fix. And then very luckily, Santiago Gomez opened up Paddle House in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, about a 12-minute bike ride from my apartment. I got to start playing 2 years ago when that club opened up. And then, much to my enjoyment, Paddle House opened up another club about 120 yards from my apartment. So now I really don't even have to go very far to play. I started playing at Paddle House, developed a great group of friends, and a community kind of has grown around this game. That's another aspect of this game that I think is wonderful. Whether you're a woman or a man or a junior or a senior, there's lots of people playing, and there's lots of communities and WhatsApp groups developing around the game. And there's all these chats like, "I've got a court booked now. Do you want to join the game?" And so there's a big community around it. And I think people are really responding to that as well. It's a very welcoming, open community around the game.
And is that what led to getting involved with the association itself and becoming a committee member there?
Well, I kept getting more and more involved. So got a chance to represent the United States playing. I saw an Instagram post, frankly, 2.5 years ago about trying out for the Pan American senior team to represent the USA at the Pan American Senior Games. And I turned to a friend of mine who's another tennis squash junkie, and I said, "Come on, let's get good at this game, and let's try to make the team." And we got lucky enough and made the team. And I've done it a couple times now, and I keep playing, with friends here. I've just gotten to know so many people at my stage in life. It's kind of fun to get involved with things that are in growth mode. Or maybe it's just me, and goes back to helping and advising fintech companies, which are always in growth mode or trying to be in growth mode. I see this sport like a startup almost in the US. I mean, it's so tiny. There's only 250, 300 courts right now in America. And to put that in perspective, 20,000 courts in Spain. Spain is 43 million people, 20,000 courts. We are a country of 330 million people with 250, 300 courts. So there's a lot of room for growth here. Not saying we'll get to the same market penetration rate as Spain, but if we get a quarter of the way, we're talking about massive growth.
Is there a global competition? Is there like a...
Yeah, there's the World Games. There's all sorts of things. I think the theory or what I've heard rumblings of is the sport would like to be in position to be included in the Olympics in around 2032. I think it's played in about 70 countries around the world now. There's associations like the U.S. Padel Association for each country. There's a governing body called the FIP, Federación Internacional del Padel. It's getting itself organized and set up for global growth and Olympics.
When you think about the growth of the sport, and then you put it in terms of the example that you gave, 20,000 courts in Spain, 300 whatever or so in the U.S., and assuming there's that kind of growth trajectory, are there investment opportunities? Or what does that mean for people interested in investing in the sport?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a race on in terms of building clubs and building courts. So what does that mean? That means club owners try to build multi-location brands. And you've seen that. I think Santi's done a great job here in New York with Paddle House. He's now got 3 locations, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and Dumbo, and all in Brooklyn. And then I know he's opening up in Nashville. They announced that recently. And I'm sure there's going to be multiple cities around the United States with the Paddle House brand on it. You've seen in California, there's a company called Tactica Paddle. They've opened up, started in San Diego. I think they're moving north up in California. In Florida, in Miami, Reserve Paddle, which is probably more the high-end brand if you wanted to put them in placement. Beautifully located, just amazing facility. I think you're starting to see, so club owners, obviously court manufacturing, court building, and then all the equipment and apparel around it. I think all the technology around the game, reservations, rankings, rating systems. I think there's going to be a lot of software development, continual improvement of these apps, and then the payments around all of this, that creates fintech opportunities too. So I think there'll be multiple ways to kind of invest or be a part of the paddle community. I also think sponsorships for companies, corporate branding, entertainment, events around paddle for employees, for clients. You're going to see more of that as the tournaments grow, as the profile of the tournaments grows, more U.S. Open type opportunities to get involved in the game.
Yeah. What's coming up next in this world for you? What are you looking forward to in the paddle world?
For me, I think, I'm very focused on helping out at the board level right now at the USPA. I think that's going to mean probably getting involved in this U.S. Open Championships. I'm hopeful for me to continue to play I play in the I wish I had learned this sport when I was 35, not 58. I play in the 55 and over category tournaments and try to do as well in that category as I can. My goal personally is just to get a high enough ranking so I can represent the U.S. on U.S. teams when they make those selections. So that's my goal personally. But I really just want to help the sport grow and become more mainstream in the United States. I think it is an amazing form of exercise, a great community. I really believe that sports in general are a great connector for people, and it's good for the world and good for our health and good for our communities. So anything I can do to help that is great.
Absolutely. You make a great point about that, sports. That was one of the things I loved about rugby when I played rugby in college. It was an international sport.
Yeah.
It wasn't played very much here in the U.S., maybe except here in the Northeast. But it was something I always hoped would garner greater attention. But I think paddle has that ability to let many more people play.
Yeah.
I can't play rugby anymore, but except touch rugby, but I could probably play paddle.
Well, I feel very lucky that I learned these racket sports at a young age, tennis and squash. And what's great about those sports is they're lifelong sports. You don't think about it when you're 18 years old or playing on a college team, what this sport and this community that you're involved in, the friends, might mean to you 30, 40 years from then. But I'm playing in today in squash where I knew my opponents in college. It's some of the same. Now, it's different people get hurt, stop playing, whatever. But it's amazing the length and the strength of relationships that I have as a result of just participating in sports. And it's a very lucky thing. And the more I can encourage that, the better for people, I think.
I think food is another thing. Global cuisine is another way to connect people.
Global cuisine is a good thing too. Yeah.
All right, let's take a big left turn or whatever to talk more about you and your background, if we might. You have such a varied background, interesting background, particularly in financial services, and that's kind of what I'm interested in, is your perspective of where the industry is today. But perhaps you could tell me a little bit about how you got started. You were in investment banking, doing M&A. I think during one of the big waves of M&A deals, right, in the 90s. Maybe you can compare and contrast that to today a little bit. Well,
so I was fresh out of business school way back in 1989, and I got my first job in the investment banking training program at Merrill Lynch, and forever grateful to Merrill for hiring me back then. If you remember 1989, it was the savings and loan crisis was going on in the United States. One of the things I've learned about financial services is that we go for about 6 to 10 years from crisis to crisis. There's like peacetime, and then war, peacetime and then war. There's always something that's kind of messing up the financial services system in the world. So I joined this program back in '89, and honestly, I had just read this book about the Fed by William Greider called Secrets of the Temple. So I'm sort of fascinated by money and how money is created and what the role of the Fed is in the economy. The thrift crisis was going on in America. Junk bonds were tanking. Banks, thrifts went into that crisis because of their ownership of a lot of high yield bonds. So I thought the financial institutions group sounded like an interesting place to go, just as a industry, because you were supposed to sort of pick an industry specialty. And so I kind of volunteered for that group, and I just ended up staying there, and that became my, area of expertise. Merrill sent me to London in 1993, which was an incredible opportunity to help not only build Merrill's banking practice over there as a young associate vice president, but also see a bunch of the world, gain a kind of global perspective on things. I got to go to South Africa and India and the Nordic countries and a lot of European countries and call on and work with banks from all over the world. And so that was a really interesting time in my career growth opportunity, and then came back, got recruited to Bear Stearns after that, and had a chance to build a practice there. And one of the things I noticed when I was at Bear Stearns was this was the late 90s, and there was this thing called the internet, and all these technology companies were going public. One of the companies that I started banking was a company called NetBank. It was really the first or second truly internet bank in the United States. And in those days, what it meant to be an internet-based financial services company was you had a website, and then people would do all the depositing of money by mail. So you'd visit a company, you'd go to their back office, and you'd literally see boxes and boxes of mail with checks in them. And they were just people depositing money. And it was a very visual way for me to see the power of connecting with customers digitally and how these financial services companies were able to take a lot of costs out as a result. So in business school and life, you learn very quickly that low-cost providers generally win over the long term. So you combine that low cost and the connectivity. And I just knew back then that the internet was going to change financial services. Technology and financial services were colliding in a really unique way. So I got involved first with NetBank and then with a lot of the exchanges whose operations at the time, and these were all mutually owned companies. They weren't private yet. They were cooperatively owned, basically by their members. Remember, there were members of the stock exchange, but they had floor operations where people were writing tickets, like I'm buying 100 shares of this, selling that, and they would write a ticket and they would exchange them, and it would go into a pneumatic tube somewhere, and then they would record it and take 5 days to settle a trade and all this paper. Well, all that was changing, right? The floor operations were moving to servers essentially, and people looking into terminals. And today, basically, the New York Stock Exchange is a TV set for CNBC. It's not really an exchange the way it used to be. That was all changing. The exchanges were privatizing. I had an opportunity to get involved in a lot of that. That was my first kind of big wave into fintech was at Bear Stearns back in the late 1990s. And it was a lot of fun. It was amazing to see the change. One little anecdote about the clash, and it actually all relates to Van Eck in a way too. I remember getting an assignment to raise money for a company called Daytech that was an online broker that had grown out of the technology of what was called So's banditry, which was a way for traders online to disintermediate the market makers in NASDAQ stocks using technology to get in between orders very quickly. I had went to the Daytech headquarters and I saw all the deposits coming, literally the checks piling up on desks. I was like, this growing like wheat. And I thought to myself, well, maybe Bear Stearns wants to own a piece of this or be a part of this because it kind of fits with we have brokers, but this is the future. This do-it-yourself online direct trading is sort of the future. So I went to my boss and I said, I know I'm supposed to raise money for this company, but maybe Bear wants to invest. And he said, that's an interesting idea. Let's take it. Let's go to the executive committee and see what they say. And I remember sitting there, and I won't say which executives, but I was firmly told that why would we ever invest in online trading? That's what we have stockbrokers for. And I just thought, well, there it is. There's the difference, the old and the new, coming, not the old, not always accepting the new. It's very hard to make decisions to cannibalize your own business. So roll forward from there. That's 1999, 2000-ish. So Van Eck, known as a actively managed shop, hard assets, gold.
Since 55 for many years.
They've been around, since mid-50s, kind of great presence, but kind of a specific way of managing money. Then all of a sudden, GLD comes out, which is the ticker for the gold fund by State Street, right? The first gold bullion ETF. And I think a light bulb went off in Jan's head, and he said, we better do something like this or somebody else is going to do it to us. And I know it was a very hard decision back then to make, and because not every firm can make that decision to kind of compete against itself. And to Jan's credit, they made that decision. And, it seems like a no-brainer now looking back with how many funds does Van Eck have now? 60, 70 ETFs?
Yeah.
90 billion under management in ETFs. It seems like, of course that happened. But you know what? That's not the way the world works. Plenty of people have opportunities and don't necessarily take those opportunities.
What do you think the big driving factor is today now? Is it crypto? Is it something else? Like what's shaking up financial services?
I think crypto and blockchain are definitely taking up a lot of people's time. There's still massive amounts of efficiency to be had in the payments networks, certainly cross-border payments. And I think crypto and or blockchain can solve for stable coins, for example, can solve for a lot of that. And things can certainly be more instantaneous. I think you'll continue to see a lot of banks, while they'll have their skunk works and their crypto stuff, and maybe they're even trying to race to do this. I think that in the higher interest rate environment we're in, once again, banks make so much money on float. They love it when it takes 5 days for something to happen and the money is just sitting there for them to earn 5 days of interest on. And at 5%, that matters. When it was back when there were no interest rates, the float didn't matter so much, but you've seen these net interest margins at financial service companies widen out. So there may be some resistance from incumbents because of that. I don't know. But I think that's obviously a big thing. I think the technology around the trading of securities, the clearing and settlement of securities and shorting, like we just had I think at the end of this month, we're going to T+1. Okay. Think how long in my lifetime it's gone from like T+5 down to T+1. It's taken a long time to get there. But why can't that be real time? Somebody please explain that to me with all the software we have today. Not sure why. So I think just compression of settlement times, compression of fees, more efficiency, faster transactions, those things are going to happen. And you can sort of pick your vertical, whether it's asset management or securities trading or crypto or lending, all of that's happening. And just the data and analytics around all of this. There's so many companies that just focus on data and analytics, and Orchard platform where I spent a few years helping them build out that played into that trend as well.
Yeah, data is so important. Last couple of decades, data has become like gold.
Data is the new gold. It is. It's not just traditional data. There's this whole world called alternative data. Hedge funds using satellite imagery, looking at mall parking lots and comparing that over time to really understand, well, how many people are going to that mall and how many people are going to that mall in that region versus another region. There's just so many ways to look at things, and investors are constantly trying to find, especially sophisticated institutional investors, constantly trying to find the edge, right? How can I get my hands on some information that nobody else has? Not anything illegal, just like that nobody else is thinking about. How can I get my hands on that? And how can I make sure it's reliable so that I can make more quality investment decisions?
What do you think the potential of AI is in financial services, either to shake up processes or heck, could you see managing a portfolio that's managed by an AI system?
Well, on the AI front for managing a portfolio, I would say in some ways that's already been done. It's a little been there, done that, because we already have algorithmic trading solutions for and portfolios for a long time. Jim Simons at Renaissance, who runs one of the largest, most successful hedge funds in the world, I think he had 150 PhD, literally rocket scientists figuring out all these equations and algorithms and constantly updating them so that nobody could catch up to them and what they were doing, is continually able to extract very high returns for his investors. And a handful of others have been able to do that because of very sophisticated programming and algorithms and the ability for those algorithms, for the people to change those algorithms over time. The next level of that is to have the algorithm be able to change itself because it has intelligence as much as the people designing it. But that to me is just like another step on, I suppose. So I feel like that's been done. Whether it can continue to be done, investing is just always so challenging because if everybody has AI, then everybody's going to get an average return, right? It's just not clear to me how it all shakes out. I think the benefits of AI and the speed with which we can all do our jobs and do our jobs well is amazing. The scary part to me is the fraud part of AI. When AI is so good that it can replicate voices and mannerisms and hand movements, that's going to trick people. And people are going to be able to get information out of people and access to their financial data and information in a very frightening way. And once that money's out, like, who do you go to? I'm more worried about this deep fake world and the quality of what's going on out there, the ability to blackmail people using AI. I mean, all that stuff. Like, I kind of think sort of scary, go to the dark side quickly. But I do think there's going to be major benefits, like putting together presentation decks and things like that. Boy, AI can do that.
Yeah, that's how I found it useful. It's just kind of prompting your creativity later on. It's like, get me started, and then yeah,
it's pretty amazing. It's the speed is just staggering to me.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something else too, and I know you've been big on financial literacy to kind of change channels here a little bit, but the daily FinQ, is that still?
Yeah, FinQ. I actually sold that app to a company called Sensei, Centsai. Like it's a little play on the word for a karate teacher, Sensei. I frankly became interested in the topic overall just from raising my daughters and talking to them about money, which is not always an easy thing to do as a parent. And I wanted to create something that was kind of fun and accessible and easy to use, kind of like calendars with the word of the day. I kind of thought, create a little game app, that people could play.
And one of the other ways that you do financial education is through your podcast, Squashing the Markets.
Yeah.
You still doing that? And can you maybe talk just high level what it is?
So I kind of got interested in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in general when I got recruited to Orchard Platform by Matt Burton, one of the co-founders. They were kids. They were all in their late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, building this company from scratch. And I was learning. I'd always known about fintech, but I really didn't know about how do you start and build a company and raise money and go through all the rounds of equity and convertible notes and things like that. And I was able to be helpful to them, but I also in the process gained an appreciation for what was the ecosystem growing up in New York and in Silicon Valley and San Francisco around online lending and online brokerage and all these new ideas and payments and companies that were starting. I felt like I had kind of a unique seat, unique access to many of these players. And at the time I was working with a company called StockTwits, which is kind of like a Reddit type thing for investors. And so they started a podcast there. And I was like, I didn't really know what it took to do a podcast, but apparently you could do it right in an office, invite somebody in. They had all the technology there. So I did my first one with the CEO of StockTwits, Ian Rosen. And it just sort of became a bit of a hobby. And I've done about 20 of them now. All of them are with entrepreneurs, people running companies, people building things. generally in the financial services world. I recorded one that I have yet to release with the head of Paddle House here in New York, Santi, which you're a good reminder to me to release that. They're kind of a little bit of a how-to on building a company and what was the problem these people were seeing in the market? What were they addressing? What are they trying to build? What are all the hats they're wearing and juggling and the stresses of doing it? And then also, how do they think about their own money? They're building a company, which is hopefully the major source of their wealth. But on the other hand, like most of us, they're trying to maybe buy a home or save for retirement or save for a child's education or just save for a vacation or whatever. They're going through their own personal financial journey like we all do and building a company at the same time. I found all those things really interesting to talk about.
What's one long-term trend you see playing out over the next year or several years?
In markets or in
whatever's top of mind. It could be whatever we've talked about, markets, fashion, consumers, I don't know, whatever.
I think I wear the same clothing that I wore in high school, so I'm not really. So in financial services, this continued merging, it used to be a clash, and now it's a merging of technology and financial services. That is going to continue. Our financial lives will continue to get more and more digital, more and more online capable. I think that trend is so firmly in place. Maybe it sounds painfully obvious to everyone, but I think it will occur in ways maybe we haven't even necessarily thought of now. I think that Wall Street's ability to discover and securitize assets that heretofore were not securitized or securitizable will continue. Let's take one example, art. Forever and ever, the only way you could buy a painting was to go to a gallery, go to an artist, or go to an auction, right? That's how you'd buy a nice piece of art. So today, there's a company out there that allows you to buy fractional interests in paintings. I use it as an example of taking an asset that for the longest period of time could only be bought in kind of an analog way that can now be bought digitally, which also means it's a security or something like a security, which also means you can borrow money against it, which creates a whole financing world around it. So now you're creating this whole ecosystem potentially around art. Well, applied just, I don't know, could it be jewelry? Could it be tangible or intangible assets? You know, we saw maybe 20 years ago the first securitization of a music catalog. Maybe those could be traded someday. I think we're seeing it with athletes and their brands. Those could be securitized and broken up into pieces. Anywhere there's a revenue stream around something, Wall Street and the financial services industry has the capabilities of figuring out ways to chop those up and create tradable assets around those revenue streams. So it could be an intangible asset, it could be a tangible asset like a painting, it could be a trademark, it could be a patent. I mean, you when you start thinking of the possibilities of where our securities and world could go with the internet and digital access, it's sort of limitless. So I kind of see massive amounts of potential for all this stuff. I think that's a trend that will continue for sure.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Fantastic. I know I've kept you quite a while, but we can do maybe 3 quick trender fads.
Sure.
All right. Virtual reality and esports gaming, trend or fad?
Trend.
Paid finfluencers. Do you know that term?
Yes, trend.
Meal kit delivery services, trend or fad?
Meal kit delivery, it's had its ups and downs already. I think fad. I'm going to go fad. But food delivery is here to stay.
Oh, definitely.
You're being very specific.
Yes. And then the last one, psychedelics, trend or fad?
We'll see. I'm sure I'll be proved wrong.
Somebody presented that to me as well. Jesse presented that to me as something called plant parenthood. Plant parenthood, which I think is related to all of that stuff. But.
Yes. That's hysterical. You know, it's been a major change in our lifetime. The acceptance of cannabis, kind of by the mainstream. It was very taboo when I was growing up, and obviously today very different. So psychedelics,
I mean, for medicinal purposes, maybe, I wonder.
Look, I'm in favor of anything that's helpful to people and their mental health and all of that, as long as there's good research and guardrails around it. I'm lucky. I play my sports and I get that natural, whatever, joy from athletics, and hopefully that can last, and hopefully my body holds up. I just worry about side effects and long-term effects of anything that you're ingesting into your body. By the way, that includes all the food we eat and all the processed food we eat. We all need to be mindful of that and more careful about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great way to bring that back to the beginning of the show in sports and health. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate all your insights.
I hope this is worthy of, a couple of minutes of everyone's time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Can't wait to get that out there. What's the best way for people to, follow, connect with you, or maybe learn more about Padel?
I'm on Instagram at BillyU63. It's not very exciting account, so I wouldn't hold your breath on that. They can certainly listen to my podcast at Squashing the Markets, which is, I think it's available on every podcast platform. And I'm on LinkedIn. People can feel free to connect there. That's it. They can call you and you can screen the calls for me.
I'll do that. Yeah.
But thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trends with Benefits.